Mara, when did you realize that you were short?
Hmm. I don't remember ever not knowing.
Hmm.
Like even starting in kindergarten when they do the pictures, you're supposed to line up tallest to shortest. I always knew, just go to the end. Like, don't even worry about it?
You always knew exactly where you were supposed to end up. You were
Yeah.
always going to be in the front row.
Front row, end of the line.
Mara Altman knows these are phrases you'll likely never hear. He's a short drink of water. My kid is growing like a cactus, or shorter is better. As she wrote in a recent essay for New York Times Opinion, in our height-obsessed society, we love to dunk on smallness. Mara knows all about that. As a preteen, her parents decided she needed growth hormone injections to grow taller. Now she's a parent herself of 2 short kids, and she's thinking about whether she might also have to intervene. From New York Times Opinion, I'm Lulu Garcia-Navarro, and this is First Person. Today, Mara Altman on freeing ourselves from the tyranny of tallness. Did your parents talk about height when you were growing up?
I remember the phrases that they would say, like, you're a dime among pennies. Good things come in small packages, which I've come to think of as like, it doesn't necessarily make you feel good because they're trying to convince you it's okay to be the way that you are. They don't have sayings for a chiseled chin, like, oh, it's okay to have a chiseled chin. There's just more angles to love. It's, you kind of understand what the preferred way of being is just by hearing those kind of phrases.
Yeah. How tall are your parents?
My mom is 5 feet and my dad is 5'8". And my mom says she's actually probably more like 4'11" now. The shrinkage.
Yeah. You said you always kind of knew that you were short, but in my experience, kids love nothing more than to compare themselves to other kids. I know my daughter's constantly having me measure her and mark her height on the wall. Was that something you did? And were you worried as a kid about where you stood in line?
I wasn't very worried. I think the main issue for me in school that stands out was like the world didn't fit me particularly well. So being in first grade, second grade, third grade, I couldn't reach the drinking fountain. And I had a friend her name was Chandra. She's still my best friend. And she would pick me up to the drinking fountain. I'd have to go get her. And she would put me up on her knee. And then I could drink out of the drinking fountain. And she would always walk behind me and put her chin on my head and her arms over my shoulders. And we would waddle together. And everyone would always try and pick me up. So I really, really remember that and that being a struggle. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm short, and that's terrible. It was like people are picking me up and that's terrible.
Like you're a Polly Pocket or something.
Yeah, exactly. And, there wasn't a lot of recourse on that because I was a lot smaller. But then I did have a teacher tell me this magic called the sprawl, which is a move in wrestling where you lean all your weight forward and kind of pull your feet out like you're going to plank on the ground. So if someone tries to lift you, you just move all your weight towards them and it's very hard for them to pick you up.
Wow. You had to learn that?
It's quite the move.
That is quite the move.
Yeah. And I mean, that gave me some power in it, some say.
So it was definitely remarked upon in school. Did it make you feel special because you were small?
I think there's some part of it did make me feel special, different. I was also a gymnast. And so I think, coaches were constantly getting excited. Oh, she could be a really good wrestler. Oh, she could be the top of the pyramid on the show cheer. She could be our Olympian gymnast, which is funny because I had very bad discipline and hated listening to coaches. But yeah, so my height, while it was sometimes alienating, it was also something about me that felt very close to who I was. It was part of my identity.
At some point, though, your parents clearly decided that maybe there was a problem with being short,
Hmm.
and you ended up on growth hormones. Can you tell me how that happened?
Yeah. So it was my 12th birthday party, is how like they would recount the moment where they went from like, she's a dime among pennies to, yeah. So we were like, I had this wonderful ice cream buffet party and I was very excited. It was great. I had like all my best girlfriends over and we were like, filling up our bowls with ice creams and syrups and sprinkles and all the things. And then my mom says that like she saw me in the line of all my friends and was just like, oh no, because I was like a head shorter than everybody at least and just like a lot smaller.
How tall were you then? Do you know?
I was 4'3.5", I believe. Yeah. So I think I tried to look on like what the chart would be for um, you know, American girls, and it's about like 8.5 years old, I believe.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was little.
So then what happened? What did your parents do?
So they took me to an endocrinologist and they did like a growth hormone stimulating test and they said I was borderline growth hormone deficient. And it's still hard to understand totally what that means. I think there's a lot of questions still about like levels of growth hormone and how much is enough. And, basically, I was making enough to be healthy, but, maybe more could have benefited my height, is like how I read what happened.
Did they explain what the injections would do?
Yeah, they said that I was, borderline growth hormone deficient, and this would help me reach a height that was, you know, I think my parents were really worried about me fitting in. And so reach a height that wouldn't stand out. Um, and, like going to the endocrinologist as a 12-year-old is kind of like going to like a fertility doctor as a 41-year-old. Your time for growth is limited because puberty is coming up. And so they were very excited that I showed like almost no signs of puberty. It was like the one time, as like a preteen that there was excitement around that. Like, no pubic hair, no armpit hair. we got time.
We got
Um,
time.
yeah, and it's a crazy thing to decide for a kid, but if it's not decided at that time, then the window of opportunity, I guess you could say, closes.
And what is actually human growth hormone? I mean, what did you know about it at the time?
I don't think I knew what I know now. I know that it comes from the pituitary, that it, helps stimulate growth. It also is important for maintaining metabolism. It's important for like bone density, a lot of things in the body. But I knew also, it was pretty new. Like I started getting it in 94. It came on the market. The synthetic growth hormone came on the market in 85. And before that, they were taking growth hormone from cadavers and giving it to the people that were like really in need of growth hormone. And, something quite awful happened was that some of the growth hormone had been infected by a neurodegenerative disease.
Oh,
And
gosh.
I didn't know like the details. I just knew there was something that was wrong. But then now they had this totally safe synthetic hormone that should be fine.
And when you started getting those injections, were there any side effects? I mean, how did it feel?
They gave me like a real cool calendar where I could put stickers on it each day that I took a shot. And that was like, my sense of accomplishment.
Stickers make everything better.
They really do, even as like a 12-year-old. It wasn't, the only side effects I remember is like I would get a weird taste in my mouth after. And I learned to do it pretty quickly in my thighs. And I learned how to, make the shots. I would get like, there was some solution, some powder. I'd put the solution into the powder, mix it up, make 3 syringes, put it in the fridge, those would be the next 3 days, do it again in 3 days. But the one big change that my mom and dad noticed, and I also noticed, was that like a hunger developed that I had never really had. I was always like a pretty picky eater and very light eater. And when I started the hormone, like pretty quickly after I like, I remember it because there was this place that I loved, like this Mexican food place. And I knew that like I could barely eat like a fish taco. And then when I started the growth hormone, I could eat a burrito and a fish taco.
Oh,
And it was like,
okay.
yeah, it was pretty wild and like wonderful.
12 years old, 13 years old, these are tricky ages. How open were you about the fact that you were doing this? I mean, was it something you were talking about with your friends?
Only my closest friends knew about it. Otherwise, yeah, I didn't really tell people about it.
How come?
Yeah, it's hard to bring it back now, but I believe there was some kind of shame feeling like I needed this thing to help me grow. It felt like a secret and something definitely wasn't proud of.
How long did you continue getting the injections?
I took it for like a bit over 3 years. So when I had my first period at 15 and a half, they were kind of like, all right, we got all that we could out of her,
So how much did you grow in that period? Where did you start and where did you end up?
I started at like the 4'3.5", and I stopped at 5 feet, which they were all very, very excited about. 5 feet.
So did it actually work? How do you know?
Yeah, how do you know? And that's, you start it when you're very close to puberty. So some of these people are like late bloomers, they say. And so, is it kind of this, you're having the hormone at the same time you might be having your normal growth spurt and you just attribute it to the growth hormone?
So you hit puberty and you get as tall as you were basically going to get. After that, how much did you think about your height? Or did it just become like a fact of life, the way you move through the world?
I would say that even like during the shots and stuff, like I managed to not make it a big part of my life. I had a very full life, and it just was like a thing that I did at night after dinner. Yeah, height for me wasn't a big factor, and became even less so as I became a young adult. And I even find that I don't think about it as much as maybe someone a little bit taller than me does, because I so rarely encounter anyone shorter than me. There's no like counter evidence. It's just everything's up. So it's not like a question.
So it sounds like your height didn't really impact your life significantly as an adult. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, not in a negative way, I would say.
But you recently wrote this essay for the Times opinion section, making actually the case for shortness. So clearly at some point, something changed. What made you start thinking about this again?
I would say it was when I had my twins. I got pregnant with twins at the end of 2016. And,
Are your children identical twins?
They're not. They're boy-girl twins. And at the end of the pregnancy, you're just going all the time to the doctor. They're doing all the ultrasounds. And they started saying stuff like, "Oh, their long bones look short." I was like, "What does that mean?" Like, I would look at Dave, my husband. I'm like, he's 5'6", and I'm like, we're short. Like, shouldn't they be short? Like, wouldn't that make sense? And they never really like explained to us what it meant. I just knew that they were like keeping their eye on it, that it was, a thing that they were thinking about a lot. And then I gave birth to them, and like the very day that they came out, they had this like super specialist in dysmorphology come in and like want to look at them and take full body x-rays of them. And everyone, like all the nurses were like watching, like, whoa, like this doc, it's like, you don't want like the super famous doctor to be like in your room. You're like, wait, I don't want to need this guy.
When you say dysmorphology, I mean, are we talking about doctors who would look into dwarfism, for example? I mean, is that the concern?
That would be the kind of doctor that would look at dwarfism. And I mean, that was probably part of the concern, but I don't actually know. But they like asked for a follow up. Um, and we did. In like a couple months, we went back in and they were like, okay, well, I think everything is fine for now. But, and yeah, so like just all the measuring, all the things, it made me just, it brought back all the stuff that I really hadn't thought about for so long or like even questioned, you know, growing up, this short stuff. I thought about like my birthday party. I thought about like, am I going to have to give them shots? Will I give them shots? And yeah, that was like I think the moment it all kind of came back.
After the break, Mara imagines a different world for her kids. And one more thing, we want to hear from you. Drop us a note at firstperson@nytimes.com to tell us what kinds of stories you'd like to hear on the show. And in case you've missed a week, you should check out some of our other episodes, like the one about the librarian fighting back against dark money. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. So how old are your kids now?
They're 5.
So they're in kindergarten.
Yes, they are.
And as your kids have been growing, I mean, have you noticed people talking about their height?
It's like in a very, it's in a loving way. It's like, oh, they're so little and cute. Yeah, I I see them at like drop off with their class and I see where they're at and it's noted. I note it.
Do you talk to them about that, or do they talk to you about it? Do they note it?
I mean, it's kind of like, what you said about your daughter is there's like comparison, but there doesn't seem to be like emotion behind it at this point. It's kind of like, oh, that person's bigger and like, or getting onto a stool and being like, look at me, I'm so tall. That kind of thing, but nothing like of concern yet.
Hmm. And you don't, and what do you say? Anything?
I've been thinking about this so much. Having them kind of brought up all the stuff about height. And then as I began kind of like researching it and researching growth hormone, I started just being more aware of all the ways that we talk about height in our culture, in our, daily conversations. Things that like you just wouldn't think twice about, like being excited when you look really tall in a picture or like putting on heels and being like, oh, I'm so tall, just like it's in our everyday, like the air that we breathe is this bias towards tallness. So with my kids, I'm trying to be very aware of that stuff and not speak in that way around them. It's just so natural. Like my niece came over with her parents and, they wanted to measure her to me and see like, oh, she's almost taller than you. This is great. Like, and I don't love that because it sets the tone that like our success is in eclipsing one another's height. So yeah, being aware of that with them is a big thing. Not showcasing that tall is better.
It is really ingrained in our culture and our language. I'm thinking about, as you're talking, phrases like a tall drink of water, all these different ways. Statuesque, exactly. All these ways in which we're lauding someone's height. How do you wish people talked about height?
Mm. I don't know exactly like I just wish it had like less value attached to it. And that's what I'd say like with the essay that I wrote. I say short is better, and there's a lot of reasons that short could be seen as better. There's people that say that we save resources by being shorter. There's less incidence of cancer. People on average live longer when they're shorter. When you're the weaker species, like we may have been during evolution, um, you can't beat someone with like strength and force alone. Um, and I think about that when I think about shortness, because in a way, the shorter you would be the weaker. So you find ways, your own strengths, that aren't just force, and like it's not just this, this chip on your shoulder, and the short guy has to have the big truck, or acts aggressive and mean. It can be like, developing more pro-social skills like humor or, being clever. But really, what I wanted to do was question the value we place on height. Just have people think about it. Like, why is tall better? Like, is that something that's kind of antiquated and rooted in some like ancient bias that we've developed? And can we look at it again and be like, does this make sense? Can we shift how we think?
I wonder, though, how much of your positive attitude is due to gender, because as a woman, we are often expected to not take up as much space, but there is like this different standard for men.
Yeah, there is. Um, and I think it is easier for me to be small than a short man. But I still like want to change that for men. I would like to see a world that's more accepting of short men. In some of the research too, I think tall women have had it difficult. I think there is like an interesting piece of history that I learned researching this was that uh, in the 1950s, tall girls were treated with like massive amounts of estrogen called DES to try and get like this was like by concerned parents would bring them into an endocrinologist and get them to like kind of go into early puberty so that they wouldn't reach their full genetic height potential.
Hmm.
And, the fallout was that like a lot of these girls had issues with fertility later. But what I learned about this is that, the practice didn't end because it was viewed as inhumane or not medically relevant or anything. It changed because like culture changed, because tall girls began to be more accepted. There was more opportunity. It wasn't just about who you married anymore. Career opportunities expanded, and like Title IX allowed them to become more competitive in sports. And I just find that so, so fascinating. I mean, right now, kids are being treated like they have a medical ailment just because they're short. Where do you say it's enough? Where do you say I'm not going to mess with this kid or this person anymore? Like as technology advances and we have more and more capability to change our offspring, like I think it's a really slippery slope.
I am interested in this because your kids are still young and they have a lot of growing to do. And you're talking about how there were medical interventions for tall girls because society didn't accept them. And maybe society is not accepting short people. I mean, when you look at your own journey and you look at your children and you note that they're also short, I'm wondering, will you get them tested for growth hormone deficiency? Are you thinking that you might also try and figure out if there is something that can help them?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say, like if it did help me, like am I a happier person because I'm a couple inches taller than I would have been. And how does that compare to taking something that we don't know the side effects for, you know? So like I'm 41 and it came on the market like 9 years before I took it. So the oldest people that have taken growth hormone in this way are like in their late 40s. And so that like doctors will still say like, we don't know. One, they don't follow the people who've taken growth hormone. So there's like really no way to know if there's long-term side effects, which is like a huge downside to me when like I really want my children to know that it's totally like good to be the way that you are. I want to reinforce like their core sense of themselves. For example, like my daughter wore like a crazy ass outfit to school the other day. She had like 5 dresses on. Like the top one was like way too small. It was wild, you know? And there was part of me that was like, oh shit, like she's gonna go to school. The kids are gonna like say something. It's really weird looking. But she was like super excited. Like she felt really good. She felt really herself. And I was like, if I start to ask these questions, like, are you sure you want to wear that? We could find another thing for you. Are you comfortable? Like I was feeling those things start to come out. But then I was like, you know what? She's in kindergarten. She's developing a sense of herself, of what she likes, what she doesn't like. Like, why would I undercut that? So, you know, will I do my due diligence as a parent to make sure that my kids are healthy, that there's no malformation of the pituitary gland, that she's like getting what her body needs? Like, sure, if she was really, really like off the charts and it was concerning, I will follow through with seeing what it's about. But if it's about like, you know, your daughter's going to be 4'11" if we don't intervene. If we intervene, she could be like 5'1" with 3 years of shots. You know, I would talk to her. But I don't think it would be like a important thing for me to do that.
I mean, your husband is 5'6". Do you see eye to eye on this? Letting your kids just be the height they end up being?
Why'd you have to go there?
Because I want marital strife in this story.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Great. Yeah, so he's different from me. And, you know, of course, we've not been faced with this decision yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is like, you know, maybe it's the male thing. He had a different experience than I did being short. But, you know, in his opinion, if you can help them and help them have a better experience in life, I guess, you know, then you help them. That's his opinion. Whereas maybe I'm too optimistic that like, I don't want to change my kids because the world isn't tolerant of them. You know, that makes like, it just makes me very upset that I would have to, that we're using the biases of society to change physiology.
Mm.
Why do they have to change? But like, you know, to tell you my husband's perspective, and I kind of think it is intertwined with what he does for a living. He's in computer security, and like their job is to look for vulnerabilities in the system, you know, like in any system. And so I think the way he sees the world is like, what are the pitfalls? What are the things that could go wrong? And I'm seeing like the other side of it, like wanting them to, like maybe they make an error, but like then they're going to learn from it.
How do you understand your parents' decision to have you take human growth hormone now that you are a parent? Do you have more sympathy and understanding considering what you and your husband have been grappling with?
Yeah, I do. Like I like for me, I really think it's this fear thing. I think parents have a terrible time with fear, because you just start to fear what could be, and it gets in the way of like what is. with what you're seeing. And I think that's where like a lot of parenting goes wrong, is like harping too much on this thing and like having it very much in my perspective. Are they being mistreated? Or is anything happening because of their size? Like, I got this thing because basically my parents were concerned, but when you looked at my life at the time, like though I was exceptionally small, like I had friends, I was in sports, I was happy, I had like close relationships, I had crushes, I was doing all the preteen things. I didn't have anxiety, depression. I wasn't concerned about my size. I think if anything, I was concerned about like when I would get boobs, like when are the boobs coming? And that it felt like a smart decision to them anyway, because of fear of what might be one day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So yes, I have like compassion for, and I understand the choice, and like, them knowing everything that I've been talking about and writing about. My mom is so thrilled that I'm like, talking about it, but she's still like, I'm like, so do you ever think back and regret your choice, or would you do it different? And she's like, no, absolutely not. I think like it's really important for people to fit in. And I didn't want height to be a thing for you to have to slay. Like I want you to slay other things in your life. It's an interesting perspective. And, she still says like, I really want you to, be on top of your kids and make sure that they're growing well and get them growth hormone if they need it, even though she knows that I feel pretty differently about it. So she's very, she still has this thing where she thinks that people need to be bigger to be paid attention to. But I just disagree.
Mara, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
First Person is a production of New York Times Opinion. Tell us what you thought. Our email is firstperson@nytimes.com. And wherever you get your podcast, make sure to leave us a review. This episode was produced by Derek Arthur and Sophia Alvarez-Boyd. It was edited by Stephanie Joyce and Kari Pitkin. Mixing by Pat McCusker. Original music by Isaac Jones, Pat McCusker, and Carol Saburo. Fact-checking by Mary Marge Locker. The rest of the First Person team includes Annabelle Bacon, Olivia Natt, Rhiannon Corby, Wyatt Orm, and Jillian Weinberger. Special thanks to Christina Samuelewski, Shannon Busta, Vanessa Mobley, Allison Benedict, Annie Rose Strasser, and Katie Kingsbury.